In our today's interview section, we are with Richard and also Silas from the education sector. We're definitely going to be discussing about the impact, the challenges, and also what they do. We already have them in the studios. Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you guys doing?
We're good. Good morning.
Good morning. Hope you had a good morning, a great one.
We have indeed.
Very good one. Yes. Yeah.
Yes. Please go on and tell the people. We only spoke about your names, but you can go on and tell people why you're here, more about yourselves, and we can keep on from there.
So we're here from an organisation called Education Development Trust. Education Development Trust works in the education sector, and we have been for 50 years. And the reason that we're here this morning is because we've been attending a conference last week called Innovation Africa. And Innovation Africa was a regional education conference hosted by the Rwandan government. And it brought together governments from across the region to talk about the major challenges, but also the solutions that might exist in order to combat those challenges in the education sector. And we've also been working in Rwanda for the last 20 years.
Okay.
So Silas can say more about the work we've been doing in Rwanda, but we're very pleased to talk about education issues here this morning.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you so much. My name again is Silas. I'm the country director for Education Development Trust here in Rwanda. So we are in Rwanda since 20 years back, supporting the education system here in the country. So the main prominent one we've been dealing with is the program called the Building Learning Foundations, which started back in 2017 and was focusing on foundational learning. There we talk about literacy and numeracy, where we're supporting teachers to actually upgrade their skills so that they're able to support the students, but also supporting the head teachers and the entire education system, without of course forgetting the inclusion part of it, which remains a challenge because in different parts of the country or the world you still find children who are left behind, those with special educational needs who are not catered for, but also paying special attention to girls because they are also part of those who remain marginalized. And of course that goes along with the support we've been providing to government in terms of policy. And later on in the show, I think we'll be able to share a little bit more on the results we were able to achieve together with government.
Yeah, so talking about education, you could have done so many other things because, helping does not, be limited on numerous and amount of different things that you would have done. Why education? Why education? Why Rwanda? Why Africa? Why?
So as an organisation, we have a mission, and part of our mission is to help strengthen education systems because we want to help young people. So I think your listeners will know, as young people, it's really important that you equip young people to contribute to society, to find employment and those sorts of things. And we believe that the best place to start is in school. Yeah. So we know, for example, by 2050, 40% of the working population in low-income countries will be in Africa. So we have to do things that are going to help young people, and we need to start early. So for example, if young people are going to go to primary school, it's really important they get the basics. You can't be successful at high school and then moving on to tertiary education, university, unless you get the basics right in primary school. Yeah. And unfortunately, we know too many young people in Africa are going to school and not learning. So there's this thing called learning poverty, which is defined by the World Bank as you've been to primary school, you're age 10, but you still can't read properly. And they think 70% of the population in Africa is in learning poverty at the moment. So as an organisation, we believe the most important thing is to get the foundations right in primary school, and that's part of our mission to do that, but also to support young people as they then transition into high school, into employment, into university. So that's what we believe is the most important way to focus our efforts to make our contribution to those challenges.
Definitely. And how are you addressing those kind of issues? Because you talked about the poverty and the way nowadays in Africa you have students that are finishing school but are not able to read. You talked about this, you are going to different countries, you are in Africa, like you are now in Rwanda. I think the challenges are so different depending on a country. How are you addressing those challenges, depending on the communities, and how are you being able to go through every class and every child to really help them personally, to move and address those challenges. Yes.
So we can talk about Rwanda, and Silas can say a little bit about the work we've been doing there. I mean, just very briefly, so for example in Kenya we had a 10-year program which was focused on the issue of girls' education. So Silas mentioned the issue of inclusion. So we take a holistic approach. And we always work very closely with the government. It's very important that the government is helped to support and address those challenges. We also have programs that target specifically what we call foundational learning, which is getting the basics. So reading, writing, numeracy at primary school. We've been doing that work in Zimbabwe, in Sierra Leone, also in Kenya, and also here in Rwanda. So there's lots of things that we could do. But I might invite Silas to say a little bit about what we've been doing in Rwanda.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. That's an important question, actually. Before you talk about the quality of education, for example, you need to first ensure children have gone to school. So one of the things we have been working with government with is actually access to education. And part of access is, of course, the infrastructure, but also mobilization to help parents and everyone understand why to send children remains important. And then when they have come to school, then ensure they have all it takes for them to learn. And among those other things include, of course, the quality teachers. You need to make sure that you have teachers, quality teachers with right skills. And that's definitely what we've been supporting. And Rwanda today, we have adopted English as medium of instruction, and it's a recent change, especially in lower primary. So what we've been supporting the country with was the support in English and maths for lower primary students, but through teachers. And then we believe when you have equipped teachers, you have supporting infrastructure, you have enabled the environment through the head teachers. In that case, you're sure that inclusive education will definitely take place in schools. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so funding must be one of the crucial challenges that you meet, though you didn't specify and tell us more of the challenges that you have met. Maybe you can go on and tell us, but then when it comes to funding, it might be an issue for you. So how do you operate and how do you keep in touch with the policymakers and the education authorities to make sure that the impact that you want to put down on the ground is definitely helped and kept by the funds, because it must not be easy and it requires a lot.
So just in terms of funding, of course resources are important, and in terms of the relationship with government, so all the work that we do is in partnership with government. So some of the things that we've been doing in Rwanda, for example, on teacher development, on school leadership development, they've all been done with and through the Rwanda Education Board, the Ministry of Education, and that's the way that we work in every country in which we operate. So we do know sustainability is really important. We need more resources. Governments need to spend more money on education. Fortunately, governments are spending more on education. So some of the resource comes from government. Some of the resource will come from other organisations that want to help and want to support. So for example, there are organisations like the UK FCDO or the USAID, organisations that will put funding towards this issue. But what we also find is that it's not just the amount of resource, it's how you use the resource. So you can use the resource more effectively. And some of the models and some of the innovations that we've been working with government to promote, very often we can actually use the same resource but more effectively than previously. And one other thing to add is that communities matter as well. So parents, the community, they can also mobilise to support education, and that might be in small ways. It could be helping your child to read at home, which doesn't necessarily cost anything, but it's about empowering and supporting communities as well as government and organisations like ours that can support to use the resources that are available as effectively as possible. And we have seen that that can make a difference.
Okay.
And there's really a significant improvement towards that. That was one of the topics you had in Innovation Africa Summit. So there were a lot of policymakers from different African countries. So definitely sector financing was among the key topics we had, and you could see commitments from government, of course other donors towards education, which is really a good move forward.
You have been doing this for quite some time now, but I would love to know, is there like any successful stories that came from the work you have been doing, maybe an impactful project that happened that you have been working on that really you can share to the public and the audience, that because I think if it's education, the impact is definitely something that we see. So what are those successful stories that you guys have been working on? Maybe if it's not even in Rwanda, maybe in Africa, some of the countries that you guys work in. So what are those successful stories?
I'll mention 2 examples outside Rwanda, but I think it's important that we also hear about the impact in Rwanda. So, for example, in Kenya, I mentioned that we were running a Girls' Education Challenge program. So we targeted over 100,000 of the most marginalised girls in Kenya, and we supported them for 10 years. And what we found was more than 95% of those girls moved from primary to secondary school. What we also saw was a very big impact in terms of their confidence, aspirations, their desire to do things like STEM subjects, and also we saw an improvement in learning outcomes. And these were some of the most difficult parts of Kenya to work in, and girls were facing some of the biggest challenges. So, for example, one of the counties that we work in, the overall teenage pregnancy rate is 50%. So you have very big, significant cultural barriers to address. But what we found was that the holistic model, working with community, working with the school, also focusing on the girls themselves, was really successful. Another example is in Sierra Leone, where we were also addressing this issue of learning poverty in primary schools. And what we saw was that after only 2 years of working with the teachers, we saw the learning outcomes in literacy and numeracy go up by more than 50%. So we have seen impact in those places that we've been working outside of Rwanda. But I'll let Silas say more about working in Rwanda.
Yeah, in Rwanda, as I was mentioning, we implemented a program called Building Learning Foundations. That one is in addition to other policy support we're providing to the country. The program was focusing on English and maths, as I said. And then, for example, in English, when we started, the English proficiency was at 19% for our students. By the end of the program recently, it was up to 54%, which is definitely a great achievement.
Yeah, definitely.
In maths, for example, it was at 16%. We reached 39%. And we are talking about 5 million students in primary that we reached out to, and 30,000 teachers whose capacity has been increased because of the program. Head teachers across the country, because we were dealing with all the head teachers of primary schools, we wanted head teachers actually to not remain in the office, but enter the classroom and know what is happening in the classrooms. So today, across the country, there has definitely been an improvement in the practices and the behavior of head teachers, where they are now able to support teachers and also even themselves meet to discuss the challenges they are meeting in their schools, so that they are able to support each other. Because again, learning is always continuous, and sometimes you need to learn from your colleague who is doing better. So we have created those different platforms, what you call community of practice at school level, professional learning communities for head teachers, so that those who are doing great can help their fellows who are not there yet. And of course, we have also supported the policy work, as I was mentioning, including the girls' education policy, for example. And the intention was actually, before we even go to implement the girls-related initiatives, we needed to have a guiding policy. Yeah. So we worked with the Ministry of Education to revamp that policy, because it was there before. But most importantly and interestingly, there was a component around the girls' education. And what we wanted was to actually help our girls to realize their potentials, feed their confidence, and be those girls who can shout out when something is violating their rights. Yeah. Those girls who know their rights and work hard to really realize their potentials. So building their potentials and their confidence and realizing their rights was something we worked on. And when you talk to them, definitely they witness that they have lived one level to another one in that regard. But of course, it's continuous work. We can't say we're there yet. We still have quite a lot to do. But what we appreciate and salute is the political will again, because when you're implementing in a country which has commitment, which has political will, then you feel, supported and the relationship works very well.
Yeah.
So there you really remain confident that you can even do much better.
100%. So going into deep with your program, you spoke about the different successful stories, different problems that you have mentioned to tackle. But can we go into deep? You telling us ways on how you go about it. How how have you managed to have these successful stories? In what ways do you guys operate? How do you help the students out? How do you help the head teachers? If it's not too much to ask, spilling your secrets, how do you do it?
So I think we mentioned before the importance of working with government. So education systems are very big. You've got lots of institutions, you've got lots of teachers, head teachers that you're working with. And we want to have an impact for all learners, not just some learners.
Yeah.
So I think the first and most important thing is that we work very closely with the government. And the second thing is that we focus on first, teachers, as Silas mentioned. Teachers are the front line of education. Every young person who goes to school forms a relationship with the teacher. We all remember our best teachers when we get older. So really trying to focus on how we build the capacity of teachers is one of the most important things. But then also how we work with the people that support teachers. So head teachers, for example, as Silas mentioned, but also even working with the people around the schools. So, for example, in Rwanda, you have people working at the sector level, at the district level. So we'll work very closely to help support, train and coach those people. I think the second thing to say is that we are conscious that technology is important.
Yeah.
There's lots of opportunities that technology creates. But as we saw during COVID, there are also challenges. So sometimes you have challenges around who can access the technology. Is there connectivity? Is there electricity? So the sustainability of technology is key. And we've come up with solutions that are very low cost and can be sustainable because we don't rely on the technology, but we use the technology to enable what we do. So I think those are some of the key things that we've seen are important. I did mention, particularly when it comes to the issue of inclusion in girls' education, the importance of working with communities. So we always try to think about a holistic model that brings everybody together, but focuses everybody on the most important thing, which is the learning. So it's not about whether we've got books, it's not about whether we've got resources in schools. In the end, we need to have an impact. So we have to measure the learning, and we have to do it as often as possible to focus everybody on that fact. Is learning improving or not? If it's not improving, then we need to change what we're doing. Yeah.
My question to Silas, you kept on talking about inclusivity, and it must be one of the challenges to just bring people together, most especially here in Africa, in Rwanda, in Kenya, and different countries that you mentioned. Is it easy for you to know the cultural differences of the people that you're helping, making sure that the kids feel comfortable in learning and, you aim at your goals, but also helping the kids feel safe and secure while also getting your help?
That's part of the job already. You start with situation analysis, identifying the gaps and differences, and especially for those children with special educational needs, you need to deal with individuals. So you need to first know the challenge a certain child has got, and then you start from there. So that's definitely the start point. But what we have seen is that it works. And it's working. From the joint efforts that Richard was referring to, from the government, from different development partners, from our internal expertise, it's working. I remember 10 years back, no one was even wondering about it or discussing it or putting it on the table to be discussed. But today, it's a priority, either from government, from ourselves, from everyone. So again, we're not there yet. We still have quite a lot to do, but the trajectory is really positive.
And I could maybe just add one other thing about inclusion specifically, and that whole thing around understanding the communities that you're working with. So an example from Kenya, and it's also an example of where we did something that didn't cost more money, but it was using the available resources more effectively. So we focused on, in Kenya, they have community health volunteers. So community health volunteers are supported by the Ministry of Health. So what we did was we linked them to the schools that we were working with, and of course they know the community best. So we use them as the mechanism to communicate with the community, because they know the community best, but they weren't working closely with schools, for example, to consider, well, if a certain girl hasn't come to school that day, the head teacher can pick up the phone, call the community health volunteer, and the health volunteers in the community can even go to the house and understand what happened today, what was the problem. So there are ways in which you can actually build those relationships at community level, which are really key, so that everything you do is driven by people who live in the community and understand the community.
Good.
Yes, and I would love to know, as educators and people who are really in the education field, like everybody, I would love to get these ideas from you. What do you think we should be focusing on in our education? What we get from classes, what do you think should be the key things that we should be focusing on? And maybe it's, if it's books, if it's so much homework like that. Tell us a little bit about, from your experiences in education, and basing on Rwanda, on what maybe we are lacking, basing from that, or maybe what Africans we need. So what do you think we should be focusing on? What do you think should be our students be getting from class?
And what needs to be improved, maybe?
Yeah, what needs to be improved?
Yeah.
Yes, you can tell. Yes.
Yeah, the very first thing is making sure that all the children are going to school. That's number one priority. Because everything we talk about education, we need to start from school there. And when they are in school, yes, then teachers. We need quality teachers, definitely.
Yeah.
Because as we've been discussing, teachers are paramount when it comes to teaching the learning process. So we need to make sure that we have teachers. But again, we need a safe environment, and environment means that mood, school mood, classroom mood, a mood that children will miss when they're on the weekend, Saturday, Sunday. They can't wait for Monday to come to go back to school. And that is done by head teachers, school sector, education inspectors, everyone, all of us. Yeah. So that also remains important. But of course, equipment and materials. I want to touch a little bit on the STEM, for example, STEM subjects.
Yes.
We need relevant equipments, because there's no way you can do science if you don't have laboratory, for example. Yeah. There's no way you can do ICT if you don't have computer. So we need those sufficient equipment and materials to be in our schools. But also make sure that our teachers know how to use those materials, but then make them really accessible for our children. Because again, in some schools you find materials are there, books are there, but then they are
nobody is using them.
Yeah, no one is using them. So we need to make sure that they are being used, and then in that case you will ensure that teachers are there, materials are there, and environment is safe. In that case, you would be sure that the learning and teaching is taking place.
Maybe just to add, so I would really emphasise STEM. So we know in a lot of African countries there's not enough young people doing STEM, and particularly girls. Yeah. So I'd encourage all young people to really think about STEM subjects. That's not to say that the art subjects are not important, of course they are, for creative industries, they're key. But STEM subjects are often underrepresented. Yeah. And the last thing I'd say is that we need to help young people with careers guidance. So making good choices about what their pathways are going to be, that should start early. Yes. We have experience of doing that in other contexts, other countries, and we think it's a gap that perhaps more attention needs to be paid to allow young people to make good choices that both align with what they would like to do, but also what are the opportunities available for them and how are they going to access them.
As I would love to, you talked about something about safe environment. What do you mean by safe environment? You know, how would you describe that safe environment for a child, for a student who's in school, or maybe for an educator, a teacher? Tell us a little bit about that safe environment.
Let's start from leadership. The school leadership, a head teacher at school, not only in school, in any working environment, even here. Yeah. A head teacher has a big role to play to make sure teachers are comfortable. But how to make them comfortable? One way is supporting them. Because one of the things which make any person not feeling comfortable is when you don't have what it takes to do your job. Yeah. So that's part of it. Make sure that the environment is so supportive for teachers, but for students as well. And then we go to students, then methodology we use when we are teaching. A very quick example, you ask a question to a kid, he's not able to make it, but should we cane them or we should encourage them? When you cane them, then definitely tomorrow they won't come back.
Fear, yeah.
They will never come back, or of course they won't feel comfortable. I remember in some societies or early years of our education, you could see a teachers, someone holding over there that you can't just approach anyhow. But a teacher should be a friend to students, like a dad or mom at home, same thing. So when a kid is at school, then you feel like, oh, you teacher, we are friends, we are buddies, I can tell you anything. And that's where when you have created that relationship, where even those young girls, for example, who are attempted or who are facing challenges, they feel comfortable to come to you and talk to you freely, because there is that kind of relationship that you have a bit. So that's the kind of safe environment in a software. In a soft way, but even on a hard side, then we also need to really make sure that the environment is green. For example, schools are clean and well equipped. Yeah, so that's the kind of safe environment we refer to in education.
Yes.
Yeah, good. So as we come to the end of the interview, thank you so much for coming through. But then if you have any last remarks that you would like to tell, people in charge, the school leaders, as you have mentioned, the students out here, you can go on and tell us. But also lastly, each one of you shares with us the main goal, what it is that you want to achieve in this whole thing that you have created, and this environment and this education sector, what you want to change, what you want to achieve, and all that.
The message is calling everyone. This is not a one-person deal. It's a joint effort, and including you guys. Mobilization is part of it when it comes to getting all the children to school or any other thing. So let all of us put our efforts together, we will get there. That's my message. And then our intention is to really contribute to knowledge-based economy through linking education to employability, to work. It's not just staying in school or studying, but what that education you're getting will, at the end of the day, bring. So it's linking the education you're getting to work, that we are building, investing in the human capital. That's definitely our long-term goal.
Good.
And maybe just to build on what Silas has said. So for us, the goal is we want to see every young person in school being successful. And we want every young person to have a pathway out of school that enables them to succeed. And as Silas has said, it's about bringing everybody together. So we work with policymakers. We work with policymakers that have the right intentions, have the right ambition, and we certainly see that in Rwanda. But we need champions everywhere. We need champions in the media, we need champions in the home. Parents need to be championing education. And even for young people who, as they're moving through the education system, they themselves can help their peers, help your younger brother and sister, really put an emphasis on the importance of education, the importance of succeeding in school. So I think if we all work together, and we're seeing that impact can be made, but that's the pathway to make sure every young person succeeds at school.
Any last remarks?
Last remarks?
Our final remarks would be thank you so much for allowing us to come on and talk about education. We really believe it's such an important agenda, and we want to do more to continue sending that message. So thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much for joining us and for such a great topic. Hope you continue and grow to many countries, and hope we see the project grows, not even Africa, to Asia and all the other countries that really need that. Yes, we will be right back next to the next segment, which is the showbiz part, getting to show you guys some of the things that are trending, the news, the stories, and the music. As always, this is the Morning Cafe. It's all the best.